When Amazon owner Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post in 2013, he said he would be a hands-off owner. And in 2017, after the election of Donald Trump the first time around, they adopted this slogan. Democracy, they said, dies in darkness. The implication was then clear with a demagogic president in the White House. The fourth estate needed to be stronger than ever. But for Trump, round two, Bezos has taken a very different approach. So in October, before the election, Jeff Bezos received backlash from journalists at the paper after blocking an editorial endorsement of Kamala Harris. Instead, for the first time in 36 years, the paper decided not to endorse. And today, Bezos has set out new rules for the opinion section more generally. Now, he wrote this letter to the paper's staff, which he also shared on X. So he said, "I'm writing to let you know about a change coming to our opinion pages. We are going to be writing every day in support and defense of two pillars, personal liberties and free markets. We'll cover other topics too, of course, but viewpoints opposing those pillars will be left to be published by others. There was a time when a newspaper, especially one that was a local monopoly, might have seen it as a service to bring to the reader's doorstep every morning a broad-based opinion section that sought to cover all views. Today, the internet does that job. I am of America and for America, and proud to be so. Our country did not get here by being typical, and a big part of America's success has been freedom in the economic realm and everywhere else. Freedom is ethical. It minimizes coercion, and practical. It drives creativity, invention, and prosperity. I offered David Shipley, so he's the current opinion editor, whom I greatly admire, the opportunity to lead this new chapter. I suggested to him that if the answer wasn't hell yes, then it had to be no. So basically, unless you'll do everything I say, no. After careful consideration, David decided to step away. This is a significant shift. It won't be easy, and it will require 100% commitment. I respect his decision. We'll be searching for a new opinion editor to own this new director, in short, to go along with everything I say. And he says, I'm confident that free markets and personal liberties are right for America. I also believe these viewpoints are underserved in the current market of ideas and news opinion. I'm excited for us together to fill that void. So the idea that in like corporate America, you've got no one advocating for free markets and personal liberty seems a little bit strange to me. Helena, obviously, this very much goes against what Bezos said when he bought the Washington Post. What's interesting here, though, is I think him being so explicit, because if you wanted to, if you wanted to run a respectable newspaper and sort of have some influence on what was written in its pages, you would probably do that a bit more subtly than this, right? And you can clearly have, it's probably more effective ideologically to have 95% of your comment pieces being very pro-free market and pro-individual liberties. I mean, you might argue that free markets and individual liberties aren't actually necessarily the best things to always go together. Maybe a welfare state helps people have individual liberties, for example. But anyway, putting that to one side, ideologically, it's more healthy and coherent to put 5% of people disagreeing with you, because then you look like a sort of legitimate source. People are more likely to trust you. People are more likely to buy your paper, probably. Which means, to me, this seems like the reason he's made it so explicit is because he wants Donald Trump to read this and think, aha, Jeff Bezos, he's one of my guys.
I don't know, but the thing is that Donald Trump isn't really that focused on free marketism as a kind of political ideology, mostly because Donald Trump doesn't really have a political ideology outside of what's best for me. Do people glaze me enough? Which I think is why he likes billionaires, because they glaze him and they fund him, right? But it is funny to me as well for Jeff Bezos to go, oh, well, we don't get much coverage of free markets and personal liberties. And it's the one acceptable opinion in both the US and in the UK more broadly. The only acceptable political opinion is the markets must be free. The freer the market, the freer the people. Even when you do state intervention, you have some level of, welfare state, as you say. Like, they're still under the premise that everything is free markets. You have right to work states. You don't have any state control over the economy itself. You just redistribute a little bit on that free market basis. Very funny as if they think that anything less than that, we've moved towards this kind of socialist thing, right? So very, very weird to me. But then obviously for us on the left, this shouldn't be surprising. It shouldn't be surprising to us that we see manufactured consent in action. And for Chomsky or Parenti, we all know that the foundation stone of the news media within capitalist economies is such that they are representative of the cultural hegemony that pushes them to their place, right? It's the material interests that underlie news media that informs the ways in which that they create content, the way they push narratives, the way they do these things, right? The problem, of course, is what we on the left have tried to do ever since these kind of seminal works on news media by Parenti and Chomsky have been within the public zeitgeist, is to impress upon liberals that these are material relationships. This is about the interests that underpin those who own news media and what they own news media to do. And this, you can see this throughout liberal and conservative outlets in the way in which that they present content. Doesn't matter whether it's people at Global Media or whether it's people at GB News and things like that, right? They're still all owned by liberals who support these kind of things. So you get more pro-liberal, more culturally hegemonic narratives being pushed by these newspapers. And the problem with all of this is that Jeff Bezos coming out, as you say, and making the implicit explicit allows liberals who otherwise we could try and get them to understand the material relationships, the systemic reasons for why news media is pro-free market and pro-capitalist, is that they can now go back to what Ken Martin from the DNC was saying all those weeks ago, right? Well, these are the bad billionaires, right? We have the bad billionaires in control of the press, and Jeff Bezos is coming in here and controlling what the Washington Post want to do. Previously, incredibly free, right? It was incredibly free paper. People could say what they want. They had all these different opinions that were being presented here. Jeff Bezos, he's the individual who's the problem here, right? He's the individual who's the problem. I saw Christine Jardim from the Lib Dems talking about how Elon Musk is bad and Jeff Bezos is bad, but Andrew Carnegie, they had a moral conscience. Well, no, he's just trying to create a self-system that would keep them at the top, right? Billionaires are policy failures. And unless, whilst there is still an evil person at the top that these problems can be pinned to, a malevolent actor rather than a systemic issue that's at play here, it's going to be difficult to convince people who would otherwise be amenable to the idea that news media is pushing a certain kind of politics, that it is a nature of capitalism itself or a nature of the systemic relationships between people rather than the fault of one single or a couple of malevolent actors who are part of the bad team, for example, the Republican team, rather than the Democrats who used to be in control of a lot of the news media in America, who are still obviously very pro-free market.
Yeah, I don't know. Who are the good billionaires going to be? Mark Cuban. And then, is he even a billionaire? I've never quite understood where he got his money from. Bill Gates. But Bill Gates is also sort of being quite warm towards Trump now. The vibe shift was real.